Oh, I think we could more or less begin. Good night, everyone.
Good night.
And thank you for joining me. Tonight I'm joined with Lorraine Pouchet, who is an original pain therapist and trauma counselor. She's worked in the field for the past 33 years. Before, because she would have switched careers.
Yeah, I switched
Yes,
careers. I switched careers
she,
just about that time.
yes, and
I
she
was in
actually,
banking before.
yes, which is what I am involved
Yeah.
in now.
Synergies, synergies.
Yes, yes. So tonight we're more or less going to cover the topic of the impacts of childhood trauma on adult behavior, and we're trying to connect the dots. So I would recently met Miss Fisher, and the way she would have connected or shared the information with me, I felt that it would have been relevant for me to invite her here tonight to be able to translate that information to you, my audience, because I feel like she'll be able to connect to younger folks like myself to be able to, so that we can seek the help that we need should we need it. So,
Like it's such a compliment because to be able to connect to young people is really a privilege.
yes.
It is a privilege that I can do that still. You know,
Nice.
so thank you for that.
Can you give me a little bit of background in terms of the work that you have done so far in your career as a
Okay.
trauma counselor?
Okay, well, I was invited into this field by a little nun who had started this whole association of original pain therapists many years ago, well, 33 years ago. And she felt I had a gift for this thing. And I was a little surprised at the time through the intervention that we had had. And she decided to start to take me under her wing. And I was working with her like an intern. So she taught me everything. And then she said, you're about ready to launch on your own, but you need to go and do something. You have to go and get that little piece of paper that will ensure that you are qualified and certified to do this. And once I started, well, I went to UE, I did my second counseling there. And then I also went into other certifications such as trauma counseling, inner child healing, and anything connected to families and trauma. And it is just an amazing thing. Every time I research consistently and constantly, because there's always new things happening, always new developments happening. But the basic core has always remained the same about original pain.
And can you share with me a little bit more for those of you who are on the call who don't
What
for those that what
what
original
original
pain
pain is?
therapy
Okay, so
is?
basically, what really original pain therapy is that we try to get to the root causes of the problem rather than the symptoms of the problem. Normally, you'd have some anxiety or you'll be depressed and you'll go into a counselor and you'll say, I'm suffering from anxiety, I'm suffering from depression. And the first thing that they may do is to put you on some kind of medication. Okay. We don't believe that that is the first part. So what we try to do is assess the individual or the situation, see if this is mental, emotional, spiritual. There are all different kinds of trauma people can suffer. Right? And once we determine that it is psychological, then we know, okay, so this has started somewhere. So what I'm seeing in front of me is symptoms of something that is much deeper. How do I find that out? And we do something called, besides the normal counseling and getting the facts from the client and so on, we do something called regression therapy. Now, that is not hypnosis. People get frightened when they hear that. They think it's hypnosis. It's not. It's just very gently taking you back through your childhood from the moment of conception. And we look for points when you may have suffered some type of trauma. And then we know, okay, so that's the foundation of what is being presented to us.
And you mentioned the word trauma. For those of, because I know trauma is a word that is used very loosely these days. Can you share with me in terms of the context that you are referring to it, or can you give me the general definition?
Well, I want to give you a general definition just so people
Yes.
are quite clear because, we all have different ways we speak to things. So let me just say that, for example, it results from an experience or experiences that are, can I just read from this?
Yeah,
okay,
sure.
good. That from an incident or a series of incidents or a series of events that are disturbing to you emotionally, okay? And it could be life threatening, and it could also be, it will have an effect on the individual that will touch them at various levels: emotional levels, spiritual levels, physical levels, all types of levels. So, some trauma is something where you feel helpless and you are going through a process or you're going through an incident or a series of incidents where you cannot get out of it on your own. It is impacting on you very negatively. It is attacking the very essence of who you are, and you don't know where to turn, how to go. So you have to absorb it, you take it, but then afterwards you need to be able to release it. When you don't release it, when it is not dealt with either immediately or as soon thereafter as possible, what tends to happen is people can suffer from post-traumatic stress disorder.
I
Okay,
understand.
and there are different types of trauma. Eh?
Yeah. So can you share with us a bit
Yeah.
as to
So
what the different types of
you
trauma
have
is?
the acute trauma, which is something that happens once.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, it's an isolated incident. Okay, so for example, rape.
Mm-hmm.
One incident of rape, that's an acute trauma. Okay,
Okay.
then you have what we call chronic trauma. Chronic trauma, where the person is in an abusive relationship and domestic violence, or a child is being deliberately abused and has no way out of it, or a child, for example, say daddy's an alcoholic, and when he comes home, he beats everybody in the house, basically. And this child is exposed to that. Then that is what we would call the chronic trauma, because it's a continuous exposure to a series of events that attacks the child's integrity, and the child feels helpless and is witnessing. Not because daddy not beating the child means that the child isn't traumatized, because the child is witnessing the trauma. And that witnessing of somebody beating up on your mother and you're helpless, that is
A
a
form of
very
trauma.
trauma. Yeah, it is a form of trauma.
Right.
And then you have complex trauma. So complex trauma, for example, it could be exposure to varied and multiple traumatic events. Okay, and it really can affect you. A lot of soldiers, people who go to war, could suffer from this what we call complex trauma, or you could be suffering from not only one type or one incident. You may find yourself, okay, you kidnapped twice, not once.
Yeah.
Okay,
Actually,
so that
I heard recent audiobook that I was listening to where this soldier he when he came back from
mhm,
war, the sound of a car backfiring, it
exactly
made him feel like he was back at war, as if he was hearing
right.
like so
So
he
what we call
trip.
that? That is a trigger.
So he was triggered by it. So
Yeah.
depending on the trauma that or
Mhm.
trauma would cause a trigger. That's what you're saying.
No, what I'm saying is that once something happens to you that is out of the norm, that causes you concern, anxiety, fear, all these various issues that come out of helplessness, hopelessness, um, if that incident has happened to you anywhere in the past, from the moment of conception, and you are faced with something similar, it can trigger. So, for example, if you had a very, let me use this, people may relate to this a little better. If you had a very over controlling mother as a male, there was no daddy in the house, okay? And your mother was constantly telling you, do this, go there, do that, whatever. And then you marry a woman who does the
Who
same thing. So
unconsciously.
unconsciously, so every time she would tell you something without understanding that it needs to be relationship wise and talking to each other, it will trigger that memory in the back of your mind that your mother used to talk to you that way and you didn't like it. So you will react rather than respond. Because you see, we as people, our reality is in three areas. It's in the conscious, which is
Mhm.
this. It's in the subconscious, which is you remembering that you read something about the solia. So you
Mm,
could have pulled up that memory.
yeah.
And then it's the unconscious, which is where the traumatic incidences, we put it out of sight, out of mind, so it doesn't cloud our everyday ability to be able to handle life. But anytime something reminds us of a trauma, it will just be real live in front of us again, like the soldier with hearing the sound of the backfire.
So what I'm hearing is that we're not having a conscious reaction to this
No.
trauma, but
Mm.
it's more an emotional response and a
Yeah.
response.
Yeah.
And that emotional response may not be directly connected to the conscious mind, which is sometimes where you may have overreaction by persons and then
Yes.
after the
No.
fact
It is not that you could sit down and say, "Well, I shouldn't react to this." It's going to happen
it's
like
happened
that.
immediately.
Yeah.
Can you touch a little bit into because I know you would have mentioned this can happen in the early stages of childhood.
Oh
Can you
yes.
touch a little bit on as to how that or the
How that happens?
yes.
Okay. Well, it is very interesting. I think that we need to have some classes for women before they get pregnant, and for couples to understand the powerful impact that they're going to have on this new being that they're bringing into the world. Okay. So, from the moment of conception, research has shown that the baby is powerfully impacted upon. Even how the conception took place. For example, if the conception took place through rape, there's a whole series of things that will come out of that for that child when that child grows up to be an adult. Okay, but let us talk about the simpler things that we may understand very easily. Now, between mom and baby, there is an unspoken dialogue that takes place because mom feeds that baby through the placenta. So the placenta, the baby has a cord, the mommy has a cord, and the placenta is fed through that, the umbilical cord to the baby. All right. And what do we feed to that baby? We feed hormones, we feed blood, we feed oxygen, we feed all kinds of things are transmitted from mommy to the baby for the baby to grow and develop. Now, if it is that mommy is under stress, hey, that is also being fed to the baby. And you know what stress produces? Something called cortisol. And I don't really remember when we had our little interaction, I was talking to you all about how cortisol will flood over the baby's forming brain like acid. Okay, and therefore can affect this baby in a way that the brain is not being formed the way it is supposed to be because there's too much damage coming in or too much interference coming in, like static, too much interference coming in, and it can cause several problems later on in life. That child can get can have learning difficulties, okay, can have anger issues. Let me tell you how that anger issue could come out, or that um being hypervigilant could come out. When an adult smokes a cigarette, what happens is that the oxygen supply in my blood, your blood as adults will be reduced. So you can imagine a woman smoking a cigarette and she has a baby. What do you think is going to happen?
The oxygen supply for that baby would also be reduced.
That's right. And the baby will behave in the womb or feel in the womb like if they're choking, they're asphyxiating, they cannot breathe, and therefore they will become very hyper vigilant. And if mommy continues to smoke, it will be made worse each time. And even if mommy stops smoking, if she thinks of smoking before she goes to take that cigarette, that also the baby will react because they know something coming again.
So what you're saying is that the baby not only reacts to actual actions by the mother through feeding them, but the baby also reacts to emotional responses of the
That's
mother.
right, exactly.
And that could impact them throughout their life.
Throughout the life. And I will use, I like to use my examples because it's easier. I don't get sued for that. So let me use an example.
Yeah.
My mother was a St. Lucian, married a Guyanese, came to Trinidad to live, got pregnant with me. He was working shift. She didn't know anybody here. And all she wanted to do was to go back home to St. Lucia. Homesick, sad, 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 sad. Fast forward, I'm an adult, married, children, husband taking care of me very nicely, and everything is going fine. But I would find myself just feeling sad for no reason. And I could not understand it because I said, what is this sad feeling that is just coming over me? And when I got involved with sister and they did my regression therapy with me, because you had to do it if you wanted to be part of this process, that was what was discovered. That when my mother was carrying me, she was sad for almost a whole 9 months. And therefore, it became part of my personality. So if mommy is angry, if mommy is frustrated, if mommy is anxious, all of those things, and if that is an overarching and overwhelming feeling that she's having for the entire time, that affects the baby. And even up to the point of if she doesn't want to be pregnant, the baby can suffer from rejection issues, which means that as the baby grows, comes into the world, becomes a young child, an adolescent, an adult, gets married, or doesn't get married, anytime there's an interaction with somebody and that person makes that child or that person who's not an adult feel rejected, they will react rather than respond because they will take it as a personal thing because they're filtering it through the first experience they had with a human being. The foundation of your life depends so powerfully on your mother and that connection.
What you're saying today actually opened my eyes to a lot of things and a lot of issues that sometimes we face in society. Because based on the examples that you shared, when you look at Trinidad and Tobago society on the whole, you have a lot of situations where there are single parents, where there are absent fathers. When you look, especially in poor communities, you find some of the issues that you would have explained. So can there be a possible connection between the probably the upsurge in crime or the behaviors that you're seeing from children in probably poor communities or who may be faced with those challenges that you explained and the adult behavior or the adults that they grew up to be?
Yes. Now, not it's not a whitewash. Not everybody who is from a deprived area is going to turn out to be a criminal or to be somebody who is not functional. Okay, it all depends on the functionality of the family system. I always say dealing with crime is not about incarcerating people because sometimes we churn out more criminals than those who went in. Okay, but so a functional family system, or what we would call a healthy family system, is important, even in the cases of poverty, because there have been people who have come out of deprived areas who are brilliant because they have parents who have encouraged them to do certain things and allowed them to develop their skills. But that is hardly ever the case. It is more likely poverty, lack of education, all these things affect the human being because then they don't feel that they are able to cope with the challenges of society. They feel deprived, they don't feel included. Okay, and then you would have some problems there. Now, how do we link that with the criminality? It is very difficult because well, it's not so difficult actually. um I remember reading, I can't remember his name right now, but it was a scientist who said criminal behavior has its genesis in the womb. Criminal behavior has its genesis in the womb because that's the foundation of who you are. And if you're not accepted for who you are and you're rejected by the very one who is supposed to love you and accept you, you come into society and society does not accept you. And you are stigmatized because of the area that you live in. And all these types of things come to the fore. Then we have a problem, okay? And the thing is that I still want to ask a question before because I could talk nonstop. So you go ahead,
That's
ask your
okay. No, because
question.
you're speaking, and what I'm hearing is that when it is you are, it's more or less on one end you're feeling rejected by your mother.
Mm-hmm.
You enter society who may reject you because of the area you're from.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes you may have difficulty because from interacting with these sessions that we
Mm-hmm.
had, some of the things I learned is that you may have trouble even making friends. So you
Mm-hmm.
may have you're feeling rejection at home, you're feeling rejected by not being able to make friends or not knowing how to have those conversations, and then that filters into society on the whole. You growing up to
And then the first peer group that comes to you, whether wherever they are, there's a criminal peer group, you look to that as your new parent because you're accepted there.
you're searching for that need,
Yes,
that
yes.
want of
Now the
acceptance.
thing is, I forgot to mention this, and this is very, very important.
Mhm.
Um, when the baby is in the womb and mommy is traumatized, there is cortisol is released. Remember we spoke about that? Cortisol is released. And cortisol, when it is released by the mother into her whole system, obviously it is going to go to the baby, right? And this really blew my mind when I first saw it. It says that the cortisol will flow over the baby's forming brain like acid, and it will affect the whole way the synapses and all the various areas of the brain are being connected. And resulting from that, they spoke about the whole problem with the learning
Learning difficulty.
difficulties,
Yeah.
but they also spoke about that males who are babies, who are males and have come out of that type of system, are more prone to social violence and deviant behavior. And I found that was quite interesting,
It is.
you know and but I said this, he's not talking anything about females, but as he did more and more research and more research came on, what they found is that the females turned towards promiscuity. And if we look at our society and how life has been evolving, not only in Trinidad and Tobago, worldwide, there's a lot more violence. There's a lot more promiscuity. Women don't value their bodies as they should. They're looking for love in all the wrong places is the famous statement that people make. Because coming out of a situation where you're having all those kind of problems and you don't feel whole and you don't feel worthy and you don't feel capable, those are the issues that are going to affect you
So you may have a void that you're trying to fill, and you may
all
be
the
trying
time.
to fill it via the wrong avenues.
And we call
So
it in OPT, we call it the hole in your soul. You're trying to fill that emptiness inside of you. Because at each stage of development, and maybe I should mention this, in childhood is from 0 to about 11, 12. And there are different stages of development. Each stage has a need. Each stage. We spoke about in the womb being to be wanted for the very one you are. Um, infancy is to be accepted for the very one you are, and there are various needs as we go along. In toddler, you're learning about discipline, what is yours and what is not yours, what you can do and what you shouldn't do. So if we bypass any of these important learning steps within the development of the child because there's dysfunction in the family system, then of course what we're going to have is dysfunctional adults who may or may not turn to criminality. But what we will definitely have is a lot of people who will not fulfill their true potential because we all created for a purpose. And if we have these issues, we cannot achieve our full potential because we're so busy protecting our psyche and our ego that we can't think about how can we move forward from this.
And you're saying that it resonates with me because, for example, for me, I grew up in a single parent home.
Mm-hmm.
My father was absent. And I have found myself in growing up feeling a sense of disconnect. And even in trying to
Mm-hmm.
make friendships, relationships, I find myself
Mm-hmm.
overthinking a lot. You don't know who
Yeah.
to trust. You don't know if you should. Sometimes you trust too much. Sometimes you trust too little. And you always, every time you meet somebody, you're always over analyzing the situation. So you're saying this and it kind of explains to me some of
Why
the
you
issues or the struggles that I may have faced when I was growing up.
And here what happened? You hit the nail on the head there because daddy was absent. It means that you did not really have a role model of what is man. So in looking for relationships with a male, you're not too sure what you're looking for. Okay? Because in a family system, the mother will role model what is woman and the male will role model what is man. And that interaction is what is teaching the child what a relationship should look like. So if it is, for example, that mommy is getting licks every day from the father, like that example I used, and she accepts it, and the daughters are seeing this, they invariably choose a man who's going to abuse them. May not be physically, but certainly verbally, financially, or otherwise, because that's the norm. Because that's what they learned,
and they're having that emotional reaction.
So when there's an absence of either mommy or daddy, you find that the children or the child or the products of that marriage and they have gone away, they don't know exactly what to look for, and that would be account for some of the confusion that you would have. However, it's not so prevalent now, but it used to be, and we need to get back to that. Grandpas, uncles,
so what I'm hearing
those
is the importance of a support
people,
system.
the support system. It doesn't mean that a woman cannot have a child and be on her own and not bring that child up properly, but she needs to look for support system. Whether it's a coach, whether it's an uncle, whether it's a grandpa, whoever it is. The only challenge that we have is that, of course, because of the fact of sexual abuse, you have to be very careful who are the people that you're having as that external support system.
Because those children are actually more vulnerable than
they are very much more vulnerable. And what it means that you need to make sure that your child is aware of what is good touching, bad touching, what you should allow, what you should not allow. And don't keep secrets from your child. Age appropriate information, of course, but you also need to do some reflection and some, looking at what is happening around you. But try to find somebody who can be a good role model. What also confuses a lot of people is when, for example, and it can happen male or female, and so I'm not stereotyping anybody. When, okay, your first relationship hasn't worked out, but you have one and two and three and four more relationships, and all these children are introduced to these people, your children are introduced to all of these people, you realize that you can have a lot of confusion in that child's mind.
Yeah. I read somewhere, I don't know if you could probably touch on this a little bit more, about where sometimes, society tends to say the older the child, the harder it is if you're switching relationships for them to adjust to it. But I actually heard the opposite recently in listening to a book, where sometimes the younger the child, the greater the impact.
Yes.
Can you touch a little bit on that for me?
The younger the child, the greater the impact, because the child is still dependent on the parent. And daddy is a knight in shining armor. And then mommy is bringing in another knight in shining armor. And that can't be. I'm very confused. It's going to be difficult for me to accept this person as my. But if it is that the father is not wrong at all, and the father may have left after 6 months or a year or so, the child hasn't really had an opportunity to bond with that father. So the very next person they would bond with But if they have to keep that repeating that every year, every 2 years, we're going to have a problem. Whereas as an adult, it is not. It is a lot easier for a teenager who is transitioning into young adulthood to be able to say, okay, well, that's daddy's choice, that's mommy's choice, and all depending on the relationship that you would have had. Now we have something that occurs quite frequently. It's called spousification of the child. In dysfunctional family systems, when the daddy is not there, but there's an elder boy, there's a son, what tends to happen is that we have questions.
I just saw somebody said something.
What tends to happen is that the woman of the house will spousify that child. Okay, so he becomes the man in the house,
Oh,
right? He has to throw the rubbish, he has to do this, he has to see about that, and he becomes the man in the house. And well, the criminality part of that would be for the mother to mind the rest of the children. But I'm talking about even in relationships. So you have this child in a way you don't have any other men in your life, but the child is the man in the house. When you try to bring in another man in the house, you're gonna have problems because that child is going to say, "But
I am the man
I'm
of
the
the
man in the
house.
house. What is this?" And it has caused serious problems with families that I have dealt with already.
But what impact does it have on that child? Because he would have needs that needs to
Well,
be met.
that child would need to have what we call it some counseling therapy sessions after when he hits a certain age, 18 and above is when we find that we can make the best impact because he has to understand that his mother's life is his mother's life, his life is his life. But you remember he has been inculcated into the position of I am the man. So he has to learn how to separate from that. Because if he doesn't, what tends to happen is, even if he finds a woman that he loves and he wants to live with, he cannot be a man and a husband to her because he's still attached to
To his
mommy.
mom.
And if she can't cook like mommy or she can't do this, it's
Like
a
mommy.
problem. You
It becomes,
understand?
and then you
Yeah.
have to be like, but everything is mommy.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
I
And then
mean,
the jealousy steps in and you have all kinds of stuff happening there.
okay. Can you touch a little bit on the other aspects of trauma, or other types of trauma that could impact adult behavior?
The most things that affect adult behavior is childhood and the adolescent lacks. What we discussed all the time there. Because what if you have become from a functional family, what we call a healthy family system, you will be able to deal with the knocks in life. Like if you lose your job or something like that. What would affect an adult would be something very traumatic, like you go to war and that thing is in your mind all the time, or you're a victim of rape, or you're a victim of bullying, for example. Especially on the social media now, there's a lot of bullying and stuff that can take place. Those kind of things as an adult would affect you. But if you have had a strong foundation, it will be a lot easier for you to cope with those things. Does it mean it wouldn't affect you? Yes, but you will have found a way of dealing with it. The work that we do really is about ensuring that you love yourself, you accept yourself, you understand how the past has affected you, and that you can purge yourself of the negative influences of that and find new and more positive ways to help you to move forward in life to fulfill your potential. That's what this work is about that we do.
And that's the original pain therapy.
That's what
So
it's
original
about.
pain therapy is more or less targeting the core.
That the root causes and the core of the problem.
Now, one of the things that I really like when we were going through the original pain therapy, you would have focused on sometimes in relationships, there people think it's just two people, but it's actually two adults and two children.
Ah, yes, our inner child theory.
Yes, our
I
inner
forgot
child
to mention
theory.
that. Yes,
Can you
because
touch
you
a
see,
little bit on
yeah,
that
let me
for
talk about
me?
that. I don't know if you've ever seen two adults arguing, and then in your back of your head you say, "But they getting on like little children," and yes, they are. Because here, what happens? Um, you have these developmental stages in childhood, and if it's not met, your needs are not met, or you have experienced a traumatic event, you can get what we call stuck at that stage of development. Okay, so if, for example, at 6 years old you were raped, that is the root cause of your problems. You will never trust anybody. You will never want to be with anybody. Okay, and am I going on the right way to answer this question? Yes.
That's
So what tends to happen is that they see an adult, so they see me, they see you, and they believe that it's an adult that they are dealing with. But no, it's the inner child. Because the inner child who has not processed this issue does not have the ability to hand over control to you. You, the adult, are allowing this inner child and the pain that this child has carried for all these years to control and rule your life without even being conscious of it.
So I know you said rape, but can that happen in situations of, like, let's say a parent just up, so a parent leaves a child at 2 years old, a father or mother. Can
Okay.
that have an impact on?
Yes. A child at 2 years old?
Mhm.
Yeah. But let me tell you something. There was a young lady that I had to deal with. She had turned down two requests for marriage because she was one of four children and she was the one that was designated in inverted commas to stay home and mind the parents. Okay? And therefore she felt that she couldn't leave the parents. So she turned down two proposals for marriage. Fast forward, daddy dies, a month after mommy dies.
She's left with nobody.
Nobody, nothing, devastated, would not get out of her bed, would not bathe, would not do anything. Total depression. Because she has realized that her whole life was on these two people. They're gone. Where is my life? That is trauma. We now need to work through that and help them to come back to the reality of what is. Grieve the loss of what they didn't have. Original pain therapy, I always tell people, is grief work. Grieve the loss of what you didn't get. Forgive who you have to forgive. Pull up your bootstraps and move on with your life. That's what you have to do. But you can't move forward if you do not
See what happened in the past.
not only see what happened in the past,
But
if
deal
you do
with
not
it.
deal with it, if you do not accept it for what it was, if you do not demythologize the family system, and if you do not accept the systems that you grew up in may have been dysfunctional, and that's all the systems. We have the family system, you have the religious system, educational system, cultural and societal systems, economic systems. We all grew up in systems. These systems actually control and impact upon our lives in more powerful ways than we think. But the most important one and the core is the family system. So if your parents didn't do everything with you that they should have done, you have to demythologize them. You have to take them off the pedestal. It doesn't mean you don't love them. But you have to know that, okay, they did the best that they could, but they were also wounded. And part of that woundedness was passed on to me. So I need now to stop in the gap and break that cycle because I don't want to pass it on to anybody else. That makes sense?
Yes, yes, I definitely follow. I'm just going to the chat a bit. I saw Benicia had said, I've once heard that people get into similar situations that were traumatic for them in the past with hopes that this time they can change the outcome. Is that a way we can carry trauma through life?
Yes, that is the way you can carry trauma through life because it's an unconscious effort of your inner child to resolve the situation and to overcome the situation. And the only way that you will not carry that trauma through life is if you have the opportunity to connect with that inner child through the regression therapy that we do and actually purge the issues out of your system and learn and forgive and let the energies of it be removed from you because it's negative energies. And we all are made up of water and energy. Not so?
Yeah.
Okay. So energy is, we say emotions is energy in motion. And a lot of us, our emotions could be positive or negative according to what people want to interpret it as. So when you have negative energies, you need to find a way of how do I free myself from this? Okay? So that I can now draw onto myself more positive energies and positive emotions. But when the negative energies in your psyche are from your childhood, you gotta go back before you go forward.
So sometimes when you're encountering, what I'm hearing from what you're saying is that as an adult, sometimes when you're encountering issues with yourself, sometimes you need to take a step and think, okay, maybe what happened to me? Not necessarily that something may be wrong with you,
But
then
what happened to cause you to behave that way?
behave that way.
Yeah.
And you may be having an emotional response, which is sometimes why it's so difficult for you to control
Mm-hmm.
because it's something that, and it may be even something that you're not even aware
Aware
of.
of. And we call it an emotional. You are able to see something, hear something, and respond to actually what is happening in the now. the reaction would be from the trigger that you connect back to something without even being aware that you're connecting back to it and it's slashing back out.
And anything that feels similar.
Yes, anything that feels similar.
So even if the person may not actually doing that action that you
But
think
you
it is,
but
once
it,
your body recognizes
that's right.
anything that feels slightly
Like that.
it
Because
automatically.
you're on alert, you don't want that to happen to you again.
I can understand.
And you want to be in control.
Okay, so from your knowledge and experience, I know you
Mhm.
touched on it a little bit, but can you share a little bit more as to how do you fix or how do you deal with things when you identify those, or if you come across that you may be dealing with those probably little things that may not be little that are coming to life as you progress through life?
Now, I'm not saying that every single person out there has to do original pain therapy, but it helps. It certainly helps them. There are simple things that may have happened that you can do. Go to motivational talks. You can try to develop yourself. You can do some work on yourself to help you to deal with some simpler things. But if it is deeply rooted and is something that is so powerful, you really need to get a counselor, therapist who has some idea of the work to help you to be able to deal with it. Some people can deal with you and give you coping mechanisms, but they may not be able to get to the root causes. Okay, there are not many people who do this type of work in Trinidad. There's actually three of us. Okay, um, and I won't get into the whys and the whats of that, but it's about three of us who do this work, and we have found that the results are absolutely amazing because he will keep calling us up and say, "Just my God, I've gotten my life back. I didn't even know I was capable of this," because they were so stuck in the past. You see, when you are dealing with trauma, and the trauma resides in the child, and that inner child is controlling you. You cannot think clearly because you are in grief of what you have lost. So you cannot think clearly because anybody in grief can't think clearly. So you're just hoping for people to help you to get through the process, or you just keep going foot in front of the other to make sure that you reach where you think you should reach. But you're so focused on survival that you cannot focus on thriving and moving ahead with your life.
So that is
That is true. So you
because
really
you're
need to look at
operating in
yourself.
survival mode.
That's right.
You may not be actually living your full potential
That's
because
right.
you have those issues that you really need to
To
deal
deal
with
with.
and address,
Yeah.
which sometimes could impact some of the decisions that you make.
Yes. And we see a lot of this rears its head when you become an adult and you get into a relationship with somebody else. Because the person also has the same issues or maybe different issues but similar to yours, and you're butting heads all the time and you don't know why.
Makes sense.
Okay?
Actually,
Yeah.
as you're speaking, it kind of brings to life some issues I may have had in
Yeah.
relationships.
Yeah.
And probably why, because it may be two
Yeah.
children literally arguing, and that's why it can be stuck that
And not
way.
only that, if you had a controlling parent and you gravitate towards a controlling parent, towards a controlling partner, you want to run from that partner and you don't understand why he can't control you.
Okay.
And then, so you have this
This
tug
that.
of war, this kind of thing going on all the time.
And what about sometimes when you see women try to control or be overly controlling in a relationship or in a
That's because sometimes they felt very vulnerable, they felt out of control. It happens a lot with victims of abuse, rape, things like that. Because that, you see, when a woman is being raped or a child is being sexually abused, you're not in control of what's happening. So by the time you reach an adult or an adolescent, somewhere in your mind it tells you, I need to control. I must always be in control. So I will never find myself in a vulnerable situation like that again.
but is it only in situations where there is rape or sex?
No, it could be in situations of finance where there was no money in the house. I had a client many years ago. They brought it to me, the family, because hey, what happened? Something so simple and people could understand it. She, if she had three cokes in the fridge and she came and she met two cokes, she'd go ballistic. If she had two cupcakes in the fridge and one was missing, she'd go ballistic. If she had milk in the fridge and anything was missing, she'd go ballistic. And they couldn't understand why she was getting one like that. And what it came out of was hunger and poverty as a child. So she packs her fridge to suit that when she opens that fridge, it must never look empty. And anytime she felt that something was missing or that the fridge didn't have what it's supposed to have in it, it connected her to the pain of the hunger of drinking sugar water 3 days in a row, which for her
Was a trigger.
was a trigger.
And unless she dealt with that, she would always go
Always go
ballistic.
ballistic.
And it
So
may
yeah,
seem
yeah.
extreme to
So
persons in the household because it's like, why is she getting on like that?
we knew we were successful when they called us and said, "Hey, the fridge kind of half empty and she's not going ballistic." I say, "Okay, good."
So what I'm hearing is that sometimes it's so important for us to go back to the root
Yeah.
cause and deal with those issues because we may be having an extreme reaction to something
Yeah.
and we may not know why. But sometimes it's important to ask what happened to you and deal with that.
Yes.
And understand that in order for you to move forward and have a more fulfilling life.
And not only that, when we do that, Kathy, when you do that, what happens is that you are no more, you could now be more tolerant of people's behaviors. You could be able to
Understanding.
identify, oh, that looks like that person may have an issue. So let me see how I can approach them without triggering.
And
Okay,
you may be
and
more mindful
therefore,
as to what
so
you
the
say.
communications would
It's
be better,
easier.
and it teaches you to understand that, okay, that person may also have some issues just like me.
So that it more or less helps us on the whole to have
On the
better
whole, and to have better
relationships.
relationships and better communication.
Communication. All right. Any so as we close off, I think we more or less would have covered.
So thank you for having me and giving me the opportunity to talk to all the young people like you about this work.
No problem. So thank you for joining this live
Yeah.
with me today. I don't know if anyone has any final questions. I'm browsing through quickly. No, I'm not seeing anything. So thank you guys for joining me today with Miss Pouchet and discussing the impact of more or less connecting the dots between trauma in childhood and some of the adult behavior that we see and maybe finding a solution.
Yeah.
I mean, it may not be a broad brush for everyone, but sometimes we
Yes.
need to look and take a deeper dig into, okay, our past and what may have happened and what may be contributing to the behaviors that we may have in the present.
Yes.
Right? Have a good, before we end, thank you for the well wishes and support of those of you on this call. Feel free to message me or if you have any information or questions for Miss Pouchet offline, you can send them to me and I will definitely share them with you.
No problem. Thank you so
Do
much.
you have any last words?
No, it was just
No?
a pleasure. I enjoyed it.
And if they want to get in contact with you, do you have any?
Yes, you can WhatsApp me on 753-2775.
Okay.
753-2775 WhatsApp.
Okay, no problem. Thank you. Take care, guys. Bye.